What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing super well. So welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Jerry Michael Williams. This case has really stuck with me and it's probably going to be a long video because there is just so much information to go over. There's a lot of recorded testimony, a lot of secret phone calls, a lot of police footage to go through. At the end of the case, you're literally going to think to yourself, what was the point of this? Like, why did this have to happen? It's honestly very crazy, but that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Real quick before we get right into it, I did want to quickly thank today's sponsor, Nordpass. Thank you to Nordpass for sponsoring today's video. Nordpass is a cybersecurity tool that makes everyone's life easier and safer. It's a simple, easy to use, and secure password manager created by the same experts who built NordVPN. I love using Nordpass to store all of my passwords in one location. I actually used to write down all my passwords in my planner until I realized that if one day I lose this planner and someone gains access to it, they will literally find all of my information, all of my passwords, my logins to my bank, to my credit card. Like, it would have been a hot mess. So now I feel much safer storing my passwords in Nordpass and knowing that they're secure and safe there. They also have an autofill for your passwords, so it makes the login process much faster, and they can also generate a secure and complex password for you. Nordpass actually conducted a research in August of 2021 to explore the differences between men and women's cyber habits. They concluded that women tend to use more personal details in their passwords than men. So for example, they'll use a family member's name, a pet's name, the day of their birthday, their favorite color, their favorite numbers, things like that as their password, which is definitely not safe because if anyone knows this personal information about you, they can easily access your information. That's why it's so important to create a secure and complex password to keep everything safe, and it's great that Nordpass can create these complex passwords for you. Another feature that I love is that they have a data breach scanner, so if anybody accesses your private information or your credit card information, you will be notified. Nordpass is a zero-knowledge password manager, which means that only you can see the information that's in your encrypted vault. Not even any member from the Nordpass team can see your information, so you guys can get 50% off a 2-year Nordpass premium plan by clicking the link in the description box down below. Plus, you will also get an additional month for free, and they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you again to Nordpass for sponsoring today's video. Alright you guys, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for being here and listening to today's case. Alright, enough chit chatter, let's jump right into today's video. So Jerry Michael Williams grew up in North Tallahassee, Florida. He was the popular football player in high school, the class president, and he was dating a cheerleader named Denise Williams. When Michael wasn't spending time with Denise, he would hang out with his best friend Brian Winchester and all of his other friends. He was a very popular kid and he was also very smart and had an excellent GPA. Between juggling football and school, he enjoyed going duck hunting and would often go on trips with his best friend Brian. After Mike graduated from high school, he went to attend Florida State University to study urban planning and political science. His girlfriend Denise also went to Florida State University, so they continued their relationship all throughout college. His best friend Brian and his girlfriend Kathy also went to Florida State University, so the four of them started to become very close. They would hang out all the time, they would go to movies together, they would go on dates together, go to concerts, take mini trips. Like, they literally had been best friends since high school and carried that all throughout college. When they graduated from college, Denise and Mike decided it was time to tie the knot and make things official. So on December 20th, 1994, Denise and Mike got married. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm referring to Jerry Michael Williams as Mike because that's usually how he went by. Now, they were both so happy to be getting married and were excited to start this new chapter of their lives together. Michael was able to find a really good job through a close friend of his named Clay Ketchum. He gave Michael a job as a property appraiser and he was actually making a very good salary. Mike was making around $200,000 a year, which now in 2022 would be close to $400,000. So he was doing very well, and not only was the money good, but he also enjoyed his job. Like, he enjoyed going to work every day and was happy that he could have Denise stay home and not have to work, and it just felt good to be able to provide for his family. Michael actually ended up growing very close to his boss, Clay. He kind of saw Clay as another father figure, and Clay also saw him as a son and would give him advice on life. They would also go on double dates with Clay's wife, Patty. Clay says that he could tell how much Mike truly loved Denise. When Denise would go get gas, she would often call Mike to come help her, and he would literally drop everything to go find Denise and pump her gas. He just seemed very romantic and would do anything for his wife. Clay says they even had a joke around the office where they would say, "Ugh, I wish I was married to Mike," because he was just such an amazing guy. Not only did Mike's coworkers really love the couple, but Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, also loved them. She thought they were such a perfect couple. She loved that they were high school sweethearts and was so excited to become a grandma one day, which eventually came true when just after a few years since their wedding, Mike and Denise welcomed a beautiful baby girl named Anslee in 1999. I can't remember if Denise gave birth on Mother's Day or the day before Mother's Day, but at the time, the local news was doing a story on mothers giving birth on Mother's Day. They actually interviewed Mike and Denise in the hospital room after they gave birth, which I will try to include that footage here. If not, I will link it down below.
We're just totally overwhelmed. She was due Tuesday, and she would have made me wait a whole nother year for Mother's Day, so she came yesterday so I could enjoy this day today with her.
It was unbelievable. I have a whole new respect for my wife and women in general and what they go through to bring a new child, new life into the world.
The couple talks about the birth of their daughter, and you can just see Mike's face absolutely glowing and beaming with happiness. He was so happy to be a father and take care of this beautiful baby girl. After Mike's daughter was born, his boss Clay told him that he should start thinking about his future, his family's future, and maybe amp his life insurance policy. Since Mike often liked to go duck hunting, Clay said, "You know what, that's a pretty dangerous thing to do, and now that you have a family, you really need to start thinking about them." And Mike agreed. He wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to him, his family would be taken care of. So Mike's best friend from high school, Brian Winchester, which he still remained friends to that day, actually worked as an insurance salesman, so he helped Mike get this new insurance policy and get all the paperwork together. In the end, Mike ended up taking out a $1.75 million life insurance policy. So then on Saturday, December 16th, 2000, Mike had plans to go duck hunting that morning and told Denise he would be back by noon. The couple actually had plans to go out of town to celebrate their anniversary, but Mike wanted to squeeze in a quick hunting trip. So he grabs all of his hunting items and tells Denise he will see her later. A couple of hours go by and it's now 30 minutes past noon and Mike still has not returned. Denise started to call him, but he never picked up the phone. She started to get a little worried, so she ended up calling Brian and her own father to see if maybe they had heard or seen Mike, but neither had. Brian offered to go to the lake with his father Marcus to search for Mike and see if they could find him. So while Brian and his father Marcus head over to the lake, Denise calls the Florida Police Department and reports Mike as missing. A huge search party began, including officers with the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Department, the Florida police officers, and just people from the community. However, there was a big storm on its way, so this made the search party very difficult. There was a lot of wind, a lot of rain, and it just wasn't safe conditions for people to be out in this lake, so they actually ended up calling off the search party and said they would continue it the next morning. The next morning, Brian and his father Marcus and a couple of other people go back to the lake and continue their search. This is when Brian finds Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the lake. Then, around 200 feet away, they find Mike's boat. Inside the boat were all of Mike's belongings, including his shotgun. The boat had also been turned off. So they start searching near the boat and they try to go deeper into the lake, but that's when they realize that there were several large alligators swimming nearby. This is when people began to theorize that maybe Mike had been driving his boat and accidentally hit a stump. Then he fell overboard and either drowned in his waders or the alligators got to him. A lot of people really started to believe this theory, but there were some people, including Mike's mother Cheryl, that didn't buy this. Alligators usually don't eat an entire human. Like usually they'll just, eat bits and parts of you, and usually they'll find remains, but there was literally no sign of Mike anywhere, and Cheryl just knew that there's no way he got attacked by an alligator. But for now, police were ruling this as an accident, and they continued to search that lake, but there was just no sign of Mike. Then a few months go by since Mike disappeared, and out of nowhere, some of his belongings begin to reappear. There was a hat that showed up near the bed of the lake, which Brian said seemed like a hat that could have belonged to Mike. Then Mike's hunting jacket, his hunting license, and his flashlight all reappeared. A lot of people thought this was really weird because for the past months they had literally been searching this lake, so how did no one come across these items before? Also, when they pulled out Mike's hunting certificate, it was still legible and his flashlight was still turning on. So everyone was like, okay, if these items had been submerged for months, how is this certificate still readable and how is this flashlight still working? They also ended up finding Mike's waders, which didn't seem to be attacked by alligators at all. So now the theory that he was attacked by alligators started to diminish. All of this was very strange, and a lot of people started to speculate that maybe these items had been planted. While all of this is going on, Mike's family is completely devastated and heartbroken. Cheryl says she couldn't believe that her son was missing and that she might never see him again. The community was being very supportive towards Mike's family, especially to Denise. Everyone felt so bad for Denise because she had just given birth to a baby girl. Her husband was missing, so they continued to remind her that they were there for her no matter what. Marcus, which is Brian's father, told Denise that she should claim Mike's life insurance policy so that she can continue to pay the bills and take care of her baby. Denise didn't have a job at the moment, so they solely relied on Mike's income, so Marcus thought that Denise should start thinking about her future. So just 19 days after Mike's disappearance, Denise tried to claim his life insurance but was denied. They told her that Mike needed to be officially declared as deceased, and since there was still a search for him and no body, they couldn't give her the money. But after a few months went by and all of Mike's belongings had been found, she figured that this was enough evidence to prove that Mike was most likely deceased. So 6 months after Mike's disappearance, Denise got a judge to officially declare Mike as deceased. Then Denise received over $1.75 million in life insurance. Now 6 months is pretty quick to officially declare someone as deceased. I believe at the time most people in Florida would wait 15 months to officially declare someone as deceased, so 6 months was pretty early, especially because Mike's body had still not been found. People close to Denise told her that this was very weird and wrong of her to do, but she defended her actions by telling them that in her heart, she could feel that her husband was actually deceased. Now, Mike's mother, Cheryl, did not agree with this at all. She says that every single night she would stay up, tossing and turning, thinking about her son's disappearance. She just didn't want her son's case to be closed and for him to be declared dead without finding out the truth about what happened to him. Anytime she would tell the Florida police that she didn't believe Mike accidentally died, they would pretty much shut the door in her face. Not only was the police department ignoring Cheryl, but so was Mike's wife, Denise. She was actually mad at Cheryl for trying to investigate Mike's disappearance and turn it into a criminal investigation. She told Cheryl, "If you continue to look into this, you will not be allowed to see or speak to Anslee anymore." Cheryl was completely shocked by Denise's attitude. She didn't want to lose her granddaughter, but she knew she needed to continue to fight for her son, so she chose him. Because of that, Denise began to cut off Mike's family. Unfortunately, 4 years would go by since Mike's disappearance, and he still hadn't been found. This is when the state decided to reopen Mike's case and take another look at it. They actually began working with Cheryl because, as I mentioned, she did not stop investigating her son's disappearance, and she would write notes about clues that she found, evidence, theories, things like that. One of the notes Cheryl had written was about where Mike's car had been found. She said that Mike would never park his car there, so she thought it was suspicious that this day he decided to randomly park somewhere else. Secondly, when the boat was found, it had been turned off. So if the theory of Mike accidentally falling overboard and, getting attacked by alligators or drowning actually happened, who turned off the boat? It's not like the boat had run its tank and, just automatically turned off. His tank was actually pretty full, so someone literally had to physically turn off his boat. Lastly, Cheryl had done some research about alligators, and she concluded that alligators tend to not attack during cold weather. Mike disappeared in December, so the chances of an alligator attacking him and eating him were pretty slim. Then she told police that she was very suspicious of the life insurance payout that Denise had received. I mean, literally only 19 days after her son disappeared, Denise was already trying to claim his money. Police look at all of these notes and they agree with Cheryl. They think that the life insurance payout is very suspicious, but there really isn't any hard evidence to prove that Denise committed insurance fraud. So they continue to investigate, but there really wasn't any new findings, and once again, the case goes cold. While Cheryl is out there fighting and searching for her son, Denise seems to be doing pretty well. She just inherited almost $2 million. She's living in Mike's house. She's living her life. And at this point, 5 years after her husband disappeared, she's already dating a new man and soon to be married. Who was her new love interest, you may ask? Well, it was none other than Brian Winchester. Yes, Denise and Brian were now publicly dating, and Brian had moved into Mike's house. When Denise and Mike's family heard about this, they were all completely shocked. They told Denise that they didn't support this and that what she was doing was wrong, but she defended her actions and said that Brian made her very happy. Honestly, it was just crazy. Brian literally divorced his wife Kathy, that he had been with since high school, and would often go on double dates with Denise and Mike. He divorced his wife and moved into his best friend's house and began living with his best friend's wife. It's so messed up, and honestly, even the Florida Police Department were very shocked by this. They were already suspicious of Denise committing insurance fraud, but now that she was marrying her husband's best friend, who was the one that wrote the insurance policy, they began to suspect Denise and Brian even more. They started to investigate the couple to see if they could prove that Denise and Brian had committed insurance fraud and had something to do with Mike's disappearance, but there was just no solid proof. So in 2005, Denise and Brian officially tie the knot. As I mentioned, Brian moved into Mike's house and he was now the stepfather of Mike's daughter, Anslee. And now Denise was the stepmother to Brian and Kathy's son. It honestly was crazy, but they were living pretty well in Mike's house, enjoying his money, enjoying his things, and just being happy together. They actually still remained close to Brian's ex-wife, Kathy. Like, Kathy and Denise would constantly talk on the phone. They would go hang out. Like, they were still friends, which I thought was a little bit weird since this woman is now dating your ex-husband. So at first, things between Brian and Denise seemed to be going well until 2012. This is when things in their relationship started to get rocky. Denise was having an affair. She was cheating on Brian. Brian found out about it, got very mad, and from there, they just started arguing constantly. They were arguing so much that the couple decided to separate, and Denise told Brian that she was thinking of filing for divorce. Now, Brian did not handle the separation well at all. 4 years later, in 2016, Denise was getting inside her car to head over to work. At this point, she was working at the university, so she was driving to work, and all of a sudden, she felt someone rise from behind the seat. Then she felt someone push a gun into her side. When she looked back, this person was Brian Winchester. Brian told Denise to keep driving, and then he threatened both of their lives. He said he couldn't handle the separation, he didn't want to divorce her, he didn't want to lose her, and Denise was freaking out. She was so scared she was going to lose her life, but somehow she was able to get Brian to get calm and put the gun away. Then she drove him back to his car, and when he was getting out, she saw him pull out a gun, pull out a sheet, pull out some tools, and some bleach. So seeing these items really freaked her out, so as soon as Brian got out of the car, she booked it and went straight to the Florida Police Department to report the incident. There is footage of Denise at the police station reporting what Brian did to her, which I will include some clips of it here. It's pretty long, I think it's like an hour and a half long. When Denise walked into the police station, detectives were very happy. They saw this as an opportunity to finally get Denise to talk about Mike. Mike. For the past 16 years, Denise avoided police at all costs. She never did any public interviews about her husband's disappearance. She never did any voluntary interviews with the police. She basically wanted to avoid speaking about Mike at all costs. So police were pretty much gonna make Denise feel comfortable. They were gonna take her incident report seriously and tell her, oh my gosh, like your life is in danger with Brian. Like, you know what? He probably killed your husband and then was gonna kill you. Like, you need to report him. You need to do something about it because he's a dangerous man. Like, they were pretty much just trying to play Denise so that she would feel like her life was actually in danger and officially file a report against Brian. Then if Denise filed a report against Brian and Brian was arrested, he might be so mad at Denise that he would throw her under the bus and confess to everything they did to Mike.
Just give me a rundown on what happened today.
We're almost in the 4th year of our separation and divorce. I'll just tell you about what happened today. Okay. So I go out to my car to go to work. I work at FSU. I was calling my sister, and this person starts climbing out of the very back, and I couldn't tell at first who it was, but then immediately I knew who it was, but I was screaming in the phone, help me. I didn't know if she had picked up there or not. So I was screaming, help me, and then he grabbed the phone. So I don't know if he turned it off. I don't know how. I never saw the phone again. But he was up and grabbing me, and he pulled my face pretty hard, and he goes, he's cussing, you will turn here, you will turn here. And I turned around and I go, what do you mean hurt me? And he pulled out a gun, like a gun, not a hunting gun, but like a gun that he would kill someone with. And he put it right here in my ribs.
Denise, but I'm telling you, he killed Mike, and he was going to kill you and make you go away. You need to hear that, and you need to hear it a lot. You were going to die today. You got lucky. Okay? Next time, it might be he catches Anslee and you, and he kills Anslee in front of you just to hurt you. He goes to prison for murder. You'll never see him again. He killed Mike, and he buried Mike where no one can ever find him. That is the truth. I'm wondering if he was taking you to the same place today that he buried Mike, because he's done it before. You have to wrap your mind around it, Denise.
Why do you think Mike perished in the lake? Because he didn't die like Seminole, okay?
That's what I've always believed. That's what I believe.
And why?
I've never been proven anything different.
So they played this pretty well, and they got Denise to file official charges against Brian. After Denise left the police station, she called Kathy and told her, you need to tell Marcus that he needs to tell Brian that I'm not talking. Again, Marcus is Brian's father, so she was basically trying to avoid speaking directly to Brian. It's a little bit confusing, but Kathy thought this was weird. So Kathy started to get suspicious of Denise and Brian, so she went to the police station and told them about this phone call. The officers asked her if she wants to become a confidential informant and help them catch Denise and Brian, and Kathy agrees. They set up this fake phone call with Denise where basically Kathy was going to lie and say that she had been subpoenaed and that they were going to ask her about Mike's disappearance. Now this is the part that gets a little confusing to me. I'm not sure if Kathy already knew that Brian and Denise had planned Mike's death or what happened there, but I will include a clip of the phone call here so you guys can listen to it.
Hang on one second. I just got in the car. I just stopped to get coffee. Okay, so I am it's starting to mist again. This is going to be like a miserable drive. So I'm kind of freaking out about this subpoena.
I'm sure. When is it?
It's February 22nd. Here's my problem. I'm going to get upset here, but my problem is I know they're wanting to talk to me about Mike. I've always just pretended like I don't know anything. And I mean, I do know.
What do you know?
Do you remember back when all of that happened with you and Brian and Chuck in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Well, Brian called me crying and mad. Brian had figured out that you were cheating on him with Chuck. And he just told me about Mike.
What did he say? He called you upset about Chuck, and then he wanted to talk about Mike.
He was mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told me about what happened to Mike.
Well, I would love to know what happened to Mike. He never told me.
Brian told me that y'all planned it.
Planned what?
You know something, Denise, because whenever I was going out to see Marcus, you're like, tell Marcus to tell Brian I'm not talking.
Yeah.
And I knew what that meant.
Well, that's why, because what they've been doing is they've been lying to me.
Honestly, this phone call was pretty weird, but it strengthened the suspicions that police had about Denise and Brian being involved in Mike's disappearance. So after all of this happened, Brian was arrested and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed robbery. Then in December of 2017, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. While he was in jail, he had a lot of time to himself to think about his life, his decisions, his mistakes, everything. This is when he decided to finally tell the truth about what happened to his best friend Mike. Brian confessed to everything. He told police that him and Denise had planned Mike's death and were lovers way before they got married in 2005. Brian's testimony is made public. You can watch it on YouTube. I think all of his testimony and Kathy's testimony together was like 4 hours long. I will include some clips of it here, but if you do want to watch the entire thing, I will link it down below. So Brian goes back to day one and tells police when this affair started.
I remember one night in particular, there were several nights that we did this, but one night in particular, we started talking about sex a lot.
Did we?
The four of us. And I was friends with Denise in middle school and high school, but I was never attracted to her until that point. And so after we started talking about sexual things and things that married couples shouldn't be talking about with each other, I think that's when the spark kind of started between the two of us.
So let's go to October 13th, 1997. You said that's the date that you used as an anniversary or something?
Yes, sir. We were going out, like I said, going out a lot. And one night in particular, we were going to Floyd's. And so Denise and I, we pulled up on Tennessee Street, and Denise and I jumped out of the car and left Mike and Kathy to go park the car, and went down to the entrance of Floyd's, and that was the first place that we kissed each other and made out. And
from that moment, their affair officially began. They would meet at the parking lots at a church to have sex. They would go to hotels. They would meet during their lunch breaks. They would take trips together. Honestly, I don't know how they hid this affair from Mike and Kathy, but they were just so happy together and were trying to brainstorm ideas on how they could officially be together. They both agreed to stop having sex with their spouses, and they knew that their spouses were an issue. If they wanted to officially be together, they were going to have to either divorce their spouses or do something else. Now, this is where things get very ridiculous and honestly just make me very angry. So Denise told Brian that she couldn't divorce Mike because it would be frowned upon by her religion and her family. She didn't want her reputation to be ruined, so she couldn't go through with divorce, but she said she could go through with murder. Honestly, where's the logic in that? You don't want to divorce someone because it's morally wrong, but you're okay with killing them? It just doesn't make sense to me, but Brian agreed with this and was like, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. We'll kill Mike and then we'll get his insurance money and we'll be happy forever. So they started brainstorming some ideas on how they could do this, and one of the plans that they had was that the four of them would go on a boat trip and they would both push their spouses overboard. Then they would just let Mike and Kathy drown, and after they died, then Denise and Brian would jump into the lake and make it seem as if an accident occurred and they were the only survivors.
The four of us would go out on a boat out into the Gulf.
The four of you being who?
Me and Kathy and Denise and Mike. And we'd go out in a boat on the Gulf, and basically that Kathy and Mike would be pushed overboard, and that Denise and I would find a buoy way offshore that we could hold on to and either let the boat sink or let the boat take off on its own or whatever, and make it look like we had an accident on the water, and that Denise and I had survived the accident.
Denise really liked this plan, but Brian said, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable killing the mother of my son, so let's not do that.
I had no desire whatsoever for anything to happen to Kathy. I didn't really emphasize that with Denise because it was not good for me to express affection or, care about what happened to Kathy with Denise. But silently to myself, I was never going to allow anything to happen to my son's mom.
That's when they came up with the plan to have Mike and Brian go hunting, have Mike go overboard, and then drown to death. They liked this idea because it gave Mike the chance to survive. They thought that if Mike fell over by accident, then it would be in God's hand whether or not he survives. So they set this plan in motion, and the night before Mike and Brian are supposed to go hunting, Mike calls Brian and tells him, listen, I actually can't go hunting tomorrow. My wife doesn't want me to go. Which Brian was pretty shocked to hear because him and Denise had literally planned this, so he didn't understand why Denise told him not to go. So Brian immediately calls Denise, and she says she basically got cold feet. Brian and Denise talk about it a little bit more, and in the end, Denise says, okay, fine, let's go through with it. So then they move the hunting trip to the following week. Now it's Saturday, December 16th, 2000. This is a day that Mike disappeared. The night before they went hunting, Brian took his wife Kathy to a concert and made sure she got very drunk so she would sleep in the next morning. No one knew that Brian was supposed to go hunting with Mike besides Mike and Denise. So he didn't want Kathy to wake up in the morning and notice that Brian was gone. He needed his alibi to be strong, and that when Kathy woke up, he would already be back from the hunting trip, lying in bed next to his wife. The next morning, Brian wakes up early and goes and meets Mike at a gas station. He tells Mike that he's taking him to a very special secret location to go hunting and tells him to make sure to bring his waders. Then he tells Mike that his phone has died, so he shouldn't bother to call him on the way there. His phone actually wasn't dead, he just had turned it off so that it wouldn't ping in the area where Mike would disappear. Then the two leave the gas station and they head over to Lake Seminole. When they get there, they launch the boat, and Brian is in the back of the boat with the motor and Mike is at the front. Brian says he somehow got Mike to stand up, and when Mike stood up, that's when Brian pushed him overboard.
I don't remember exactly how I got him to stand up, but I don't know if I pretended something was wrong with the motor or the weight in the boat was off or something, but I basically stopped the boat and got him to stand up, and when he did, I pushed him into the water. He was in the water, and he was like struggling, and the motor of the boat was still running, and I pulled off just a little bit to get kind of away from him so that he couldn't reach back into the boat.
Mike fell into the water and he began to struggle and immediately took off his waders and his jacket. He was panicking, struggling to breathe, but he was able to swim over to a nearby stump and hold himself up. Brian started to freak out because this was not going according to plan. Mike was supposed to drown with his waders, but since he had taken them off, now there was a possibility of Mike surviving this. Brian says that Mike started to yell at him and was asking him why he pushed him and why he wasn't helping, and Brian says he didn't answer him. This is when police assumed that Mike started to get suspicious of Brian because he wasn't answering him, so Mike started to panic and began to yell for help. Honestly, this next part is pretty disturbing, so just a quick warning out there. But this is when Brian decided to grab his gun, get up close to Mike, and shoot him in the head. And that's when Mike died. Then he pulled Mike's body out of the water, put it into the back of his truck, and drove away. Brian goes into more detail in his testimony about how he hid Mike's body, how he got home to cover his alibi, how he started the search party, how he buried Mike's body, just like all these details. I can't imagine what was going on in Mike's head in his last moments. I'm sure he was so confused as to why his best friend that he's literally known since high school, why did his best friend push him overboard? Why did his best friend just leave him there drowning? And in that last moment when Brian was pointing the gun to his face, it's honestly just horrible to think about, and this just shouldn't have happened. It's not fair. Mike was such a kind person. He had just become a father. He was a great husband, and he did everything for his family. He worked so hard and worked very long hours to make sure that Denise and Anslee had everything they ever needed. And for Brian to just do this to his best friend and Denise to her husband is honestly so scary and devastating. So Brian tells police where he buried Mike's body, which was 60 miles away from Lake Seminole. So now, 17 years after Mike disappeared, they finally have his body. When Cheryl and the rest of Mike's family heard the news, they couldn't believe that 17 years had gone by without any answers, and now they could finally lay him to rest. Honestly, I can't imagine how Cheryl was feeling, because for the past 17 years, everyone told her she was insane for thinking that her son was murdered and that she should just accept it was an accident and move on. But during those 17 years, she never once stopped fighting for the truth and fighting for her son. She's an incredibly amazing and strong woman, and I hope that she has found some type of peace and closure in all of this. So after Mike's body was found and Brian's confession, police arrested Denise as she was on her way to her daughter's 19th birthday party. The grand jury indicted Denise on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Then, in February of 2019, the jury convicted 48-year-old Denise Winchester on all charges, and she was given life in prison, plus 30 years for the conspiracy charge. Brian was already serving a 20-year sentence for the kidnapping of Denise, and he was actually granted immunity in Mike's murder because he testified against Denise. I mean, all of this happened for what? Like, what was the point of this? Why did this need to happen? It's just so ridiculous to me that some people would rather murder someone than just divorce them. Mike literally had just become a father, and Anslee had to grow up without a father, and now she doesn't have her mother. I hope that Anslee is doing well and that she's happy. I don't know if her and her grandmother Cheryl have spoken again and if they were able to repair the relationship. I've seen some reports saying that Anslee and Denise's side of the family support Denise and believe she's innocent. Again, I'm not sure how true that is. That's just some of the reports that I've seen. I mean, I get it. It's hard to accept that your mother murdered your father. Honestly, I just hope she's doing well and that one day she has peace with all of this, and I wish her nothing but the best. My heart goes out to Mike's family. This is just such a horrendous and unthinkable thing. I really can't wrap my head around this, and I really just hope that everyone that has been affected by Mike's death and by what Denise and Brian did has some type of peace, and I honestly wish them nothing but the best. And that's pretty much it, you guys. That's all the information I have for today's video. I would love to hear what you guys think about this down below, and again, if there's any other cases you guys want me to cover in the future, make sure to submit them through my case suggestion form down below. Thank you guys again for being here and listening to Mike's story. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys!